You know that feeling when your phone lights up with another group invitation, another birthday dinner, another we should all get together soon, and instead of excitement, you feel a subtle wave of exhaustion, like you'd honestly rather spend Saturday reorganizing your bookshelf, taking a long walk alone, or finishing a half-read novel, than sitting at brunch, making small talk about things that actually matter to you. For a long time, I thought that reaction meant something was wrong with me, that I was socially defective, that I needed to push myself harder, say yes more often, become the kind of person who thrives in crowded restaurants and chaotic group chats. But then I started looking into what psychologists have been quietly documenting for decades about people who genuinely prefer smaller social circles, or even solitude itself. And what I found completely reframed the narrative. First, we have to separate two experiences that our culture constantly confuses: loneliness and chosen solitude. Research from the University of Chicago makes this distinction clear. Loneliness is a painful emotional state. It's the distressing feeling that your need for meaningful connection isn't being met. It hurts. It activates stress responses. It can even affect physical health over time. Chosen solitude is something else entirely. You can live a relatively quiet, low social life and feel deeply content. And you can attend parties every weekend, have dozens of acquaintances, and still feel profoundly alone. The difference isn't about how many names are in your contacts. It's about whether the connections you do have actually nourish you. Think about the person who has 3 close friends they've known since college. They don't post much. They don't attend every event. But when something real happens in their life, they have someone they can call at midnight. Now compare that to someone with 800 Instagram followers who still feels unseen. The UCLA loneliness scale measures perceived isolation through questions like, "I feel left out," or "There are people I can turn to." What researchers discovered is that people with similar-sized social networks can report completely opposite levels of loneliness, because what we're measuring isn't quantity. We're measuring whether someone feels understood, valued, and emotionally safe. And here's where it gets psychologically interesting and, honestly, counterintuitive. People who prefer smaller circles aren't running away from connection, they're pursuing depth. Personality research consistently shows that individuals who are comfortable with solitude tend to have higher levels of self-awareness, emotional independence, and intrinsic motivation. That last term simply means they act based on internal values rather than external approval. They're not performing social life, they're selecting it. And that's a huge difference. I spent most of my 20s assuming I needed to upgrade myself socially. Why couldn't I be the person who works the room effortlessly at networking mixers? Why did loud dinner parties leave me mentally drained instead of energized? But science suggests something important: the ability to sit alone with your thoughts without panic, without compulsively reaching for your phone is a marker of emotional self-regulation. Emotional self-regulation is the capacity to manage your internal state without constantly outsourcing it to other people. It's being able to feel discomfort, boredom, or restlessness without immediately trying to drown it out with noise. And contrary to popular belief, that skill isn't loneliness, it's strength. Studies on social isolation show that people who are comfortable alone often end up with fewer but deeper relationships. Why? Because when they reach out, they're not doing it from desperation, they're doing it from wholeness. They don't connect to avoid emptiness. They connect because something meaningful is there. That changes everything. Quality over quantity isn't a motivational poster. In a culture that glorifies busyness and constant social availability, it's often a mental health strategy. Here's another striking finding from large-scale aging studies involving over 30,000 participants. Researchers identified individuals who were socially isolated, meaning they had small networks but reported low levels of loneliness. These people weren't suffering. In some cases, they were functioning better than individuals with large social circles who still felt disconnected. This tells us something critical. The human need for connection is personal and variable. There is no universal social diet. For some, daily interaction is energizing. For others, it's depleting. If this moved you, comment 9 right now. If it didn't, comment 0. Your voice matters. Take 1 second and share it. Now, let's talk about creativity, because this is where the data becomes even more compelling. Albert Einstein once wrote that the monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind. Modern neuroscience supports this. When your brain isn't constantly processing social signals, reading facial expressions, managing impressions, navigating group dynamics, it has bandwidth. bandwidth for what psychologists call divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is the ability to generate multiple ideas, see unusual connections, and explore possibilities without immediate social evaluation. It's harder to access when you're constantly performing. Solitude creates cognitive space. That doesn't mean socially active people can't be creative. It means uninterrupted mental time has measurable benefits. But there's a necessary caution here. Having few friends does not automatically equal psychological safety. Research from the National Institute on Aging has shown that chronic perceived isolation, the belief that you are alone in the world, can impact cognition, cardiovascular health, and long-term well-being. Persistent loneliness has even been linked to increased risk of cognitive decline. So the question isn't, how many friends do you have? The real question is, do you feel connected in the ways that matter to you? Does your current social life align with your personality and emotional needs? Or are you forcing yourself into a social template that leaves you drained? When you strip away cultural pressure about what friendship should look like, a pattern emerges. People who thrive with fewer friendships often share certain traits. They tend to have strong internal compasses. They display self-concept clarity, meaning they have a stable sense of who they are without needing constant validation. They value depth over visibility. They are not antisocial. They are selective, and that selectivity is often grounded in self-knowledge. This doesn't mean they never experience loneliness. It means they can differentiate between temporary solitude and chronic emotional disconnection. There's a difference between spending a weekend alone and feeling unseen in a room full of people. If you always felt slightly out of step with the cultural mandate to maintain packed calendars and expansive friend groups, psychology offers something validating. There is no one correct social configuration. Research on individuals who prefer solitude frequently finds higher levels of boundary strength and emotional resilience. They are not deficient in social skills. Many are highly emotionally intelligent precisely because they spend time reflecting on relationships instead of collecting them. The real trap is assuming everyone needs the same amount of social input. Some people are energized by constant interaction. Others need significant alone time to recharge. These differences are shaped by personality traits like introversion and extroversion, but also by upbringing, life experience, and neurobiology. Neither profile is superior. What matters is alignment. Does your life reflect your actual needs, or are you performing a version of social success that leaves you exhausted? Because, at its core, the psychology of having few friends isn't about friendship. It's about honoring where you fall on the spectrum of connection and solitude. The person with 2 close friends and a rich internal world is not failing. The person with 50 acquaintances and no one to call during a crisis is not necessarily thriving. We're all negotiating the same question: how much connection and how much solitude allows me to be most fully myself? Sometimes that answer means choosing the quiet, not because you're broken, not because you're antisocial, but because your nervous system, your values, and your internal rhythm prefer depth over noise. And that preference doesn't need to be corrected, it needs to be understood. So maybe the real question was never, why don't you have more friends? Maybe the better question is, does your social life actually fit who you are? Because in a culture that constantly equates busyness with value and popularity with worth, it's easy to assume that a smaller circle means you're missing out. But psychology tells a different story. What truly matters isn't how many invitations you accept or how many group chats your phone lights up with. What matters is whether you feel understood, whether your energy feels respected, and whether your relationships leave you nourished instead of drained. If you thrive with 2 or 3 deep connections and long stretches of quiet, that doesn't make you antisocial. It might mean you know yourself well enough to choose depth over noise. And if you're someone who feels alive in big groups and constant interaction, that's equally valid. There is no universal social formula. There is only alignment. So the next time your phone buzzes and your instinct is to stay home, don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. Pause. Ask yourself what you actually need. Sometimes choosing the quiet isn't avoidance. If this resonated with you, take a moment to like this video so more people who ever felt different about their social lives can find it. Share it with someone who might need permission to honor their own rhythm. And subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind everyday experiences we rarely question. Your need for space is not a flaw, it's part of your design.